All right, bet. All right, I'm
So
gonna end
that's
the
cool,
podcast
man.
right now.
Okay.
We're right at 2 hours. I'm gonna end it right now, and then yeah, I'll save it
Wait,
and
wait,
then
wait, 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 wait.
yeah,
So next week we're not recording.
no.
Okay.
Unless I do it
We should
remotely,
probably
but that's gonna be hard.
we should probably mention that. Probably not. Not
I
that
mean,
big of a deal.
I may be able to do it. I'm gonna be in
Okay.
Croatia, but
Well,
and
we'll
then
see.
if I got
Okay.
Wi-Fi, then I'll do it. Yeah. All right.
All right, man.
Peace.
All right, yeah.
I said, God, give me a one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to First and 15th, where our motto here
Yes,
is
sir.
you gotta get ready if you stay ready. This is your
Yes,
host,
sir.
Abid Batoba, aka AB, aka Skywalker
Oh, oh.
2000 on
The champ
Twitter.
is here.
My partner in crime and co-host, Dr. Dayo Adesai, aka I Doc Newt. That's I with the exclamation point because he is extremely extra. You can find him on Twitter at __ Dayo. That's __ DAYO. As you guys can hear and or see tonight, we are a man down. Our esteemed co-host, our producer, the man
Yeah.
who puts it all together, is missing in action, but for very, very good reasons. And for those reasons, we will
Mhm.
discuss at a later date and time. So we don't want to waste too
Yes,
much
sir.
time. Let's get right into the action. Today is June
Yeah.
24th, 10:30 p.m. at
Yep.
night.
Yep.
All right, let's get it. Let's
It's
go.
late. It's late.
All right, let's get into the recent news and notes of the week. Dr. Dale
Yep.
Adesai, please give us with the recent news.
Yeah. So we have the Steelers. They released their offensive lineman today, David DeCastro. One of their
Relevant,
better offensive linemen. Relevant. Okay.
relevant,
Okay. AB. He had his probation reduced by like a year. So
somewhat relevant.
yeah. They made this new rule in the NFL where teams are going to actually be able to use like two different helmets next year. So
Oh, we
basically,
love
just to like
swag.
yeah, exactly. Teams gonna have like a full kind of throwback uniform. You know what I'm
Yes,
saying? So
extremely
um,
relevant. We need to
there
do a
you
deep
go. There
dive into
you
that.
go. Laquan Treadwell, he was signed by the Jaguars. I don't even know if we care
Irrelevant,
about that, but okay. That's what I
irrelevant,
thought.
irrelevant.
Two different surgeries that one is significant specifically for us, and one is significant to the fantasy community. Marcus Cannon for the Texans. He had a knee procedure, I believe,
Ah,
and then
okay.
Rashad
Yeah,
Penny. I think they said he cleaned up his knee from his past ACL surgery, so
relevant,
I
very
think that's
relevant.
why he wasn't able to practice in OTAs or whatnot.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley. This is something that we put in our group chat. When we saw that Instagram post.
Oh,
Basically, he was kind of training everything, cutting
lovely.
everything, doing receiver drills. There was one part where he
Beautiful
actually
sight
was
to see.
doing drills in the sand. So
Extremely relevant.
yes, and then one more, Xavier Howard, the cornerback for the Dolphins. It looks like he's actually going to hold out. He's actually won some money. One of the few players that are going to hold out. I
Yeah.
believe the Seahawks players too are also talking about it. So yeah,
No, relevant, relevant. So, I mean, just to cover and go in depth on a few items of what you just laid out, the Castro news, I think, is relevant only from a
major.
standpoint. I want to see what this does to Najee Harris's ADP because I want to see how the fantasy community is going to react. I think as we talked about in the group chat, this is something that we expected. We've heard plenty of talk from some of the Pittsburgh Steelers beat writers that he was just not healthy.
Right,
And
the
so,
ankle. He was having ankle
exactly,
issues. Yeah.
exactly. So, in essence, for us, this was somewhat of an upgrade, although he's been a beast throughout his time with the Steelers. For us, given how they played last year, I think them losing to Castro is not something that was unexpected for us. So, is the fantasy community going to pile on and basically, again, highlight how bad the Steelers O-line was last year, how many guys they lost this year? Or is this a situation for us to really take, again, a deeper dive, a closer look at who are the replacements. Who are the guys coming in? Some new guys,
Now,
some incumbent starters. Go ahead.
now, real
Yeah.
quick, with that point you
Yeah.
just made right there, they did actually sign Trey Turner. Trey Turner
Exactly.
was he
Exactly.
was he was with the Panthers, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, and then they traded him to
Exactly.
the Chargers, and the Chargers just
Yeah.
let him go. So they actually replaced him with a cheaper option. I think they gave him like a $3 million contract. So
Exactly.
they have a
Exactly.
replacement.
And they spent some draft capital. My view and my take with the Pittsburgh O-line is, yes, they're not going to be an elite group, but they were just so bad last year. And I think the fact that they've changed the offensive coordinator, they brought in
Right,
Duke, who's apparently this O-line guru. They're
right,
changing up the offense. You bring in Najee Harris. You have been another year removed from the elbow surgery. You have placed Claypool feeling more comfortable in the offense. You have Deontay another year in the offense. You're bringing back Jude. You're bringing back Eric Ebron. You drafted another tight end who has skill not only in the receiving game and also but also the blocking game. This may be one of those lines that outperforms what we see on paper. So for that reason, I think it's relevant. I actually don't see this necessarily as bad news. And if anything, I think I'm going to try to capitalize on any drop in ADP for Najee Harris. Now, you also mentioned the Antonio Brown news. So the Antonio Brown news to me, I think is very much relevant. When we started drafting very early on, right after the actual NFL draft, I think our main goal was to get as many shares of Antonio Brown as possible because he was going
right,
into the mid to late double-digit rounds. At that point, he was not signed with Tampa Bay, and he also had a bit of an injury issue and just had a recent surgery. So I think a lot of people were scared off a huge unknown. And we
right.
were very comfortable and confident in the idea that he was going to re-sign and felt like this was a great time to get him on the cheap. And of
Right.
course, he ended up signing as expected and anticipated. His ADP rose, and now he's a fixture in the 8th round. So,
Eighth, ninth round. Yep, yep.
yeah, and I think it's still warranted. I think, once he signed, we started to take a closer look at how he performed towards the end of last season. And I think we saw that it was more of a three-headed monster as opposed to a 1A, 1B, and a 2.
Right.
There were certain weeks where he outperformed them all. And I think his 16-game pace would have put him at, as a top 36 wide receiver. So
Right.
he's some guy that definitely that eighth round ADP warrants. So this is only good news for him. I just think it gives us more confidence, but I don't necessarily know that it moves the needle on his ADP. I think he settles in at the 8th round, which is where he's currently going right now.
Right. As far as me, as far as AB is
Yeah.
concerned, as far as picking him up, I do like him in the 8th round, just depending on some builds. I kind of don't want him to be my starting wide receiver day one.
Agreed.
I kind of want to use him as receiver depth.
Yeah.
Not even a flex position from day one. So it just kind of depends on my build. If I'm going running back heavy, I don't want AB to be the very first receiver I end up taking in the 8th round. So I definitely want to kind of be mindful of that.
Yeah. And then obviously in many of the high stakes formats, including FFPC, we know the advantages of drafting Tampa Bay and Dallas Cowboys players. If you know, you know. All right.
We'll get to that another time,
Yeah. We'll get into that another time.
Yeah.
So as far as additional news, I don't think the Treadwell signing is all that important to me. It's obviously a very crowded backfield, a very crowded wide receiver room. That's going to be a tough one.
He's not even good anymore. Like, it doesn't even matter.
I honestly thought, obviously
Third team in like 4 years.
Yeah, and I think they signed him for off-season depth. We all know that many of these rosters are going to get cut almost in half by the time training camp ends. So that we can go ahead and pass over. The new uniform and helmet rules, plus. I'm not going to get too much into that, but it's just going to make watching football Sundays that much better. 100%.
What did Deion say? Deion was like, if you look good, you play good. So the boys going to play good. So, hey, hopefully boys play extra good. So.
Exactly. We may have to go through and rank these all the teams' retro helmets because in essence that may adjust ADP and ranking just a tad bit.
Hey.
Same level of strength.
Rocket ships up, sure. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly,
Visor, single
exactly,
digit numbers, throwback jerseys. Hey, so
exactly. So what was the last bit of
what
news
about
that
these
we
two surgeries? What about those two surgeries? One
the
is
two
to the
separate?
offensive lineman for the Texans, and one is for the backup running back for the Seahawks.
So let's get into Rashad Penny. I think that news is extremely relevant for me. I think we view this a little bit differently. For
Right,
me, I'm concerned. He initially started off the drafting season for me as one of the handcuffs that I really wanted to try and get as many shares of as possible, given where he was going and given the offense that he was in. We know his history with injuries. We know he had a very devastating ACL injury, complications
right,
along the way, and it's been a struggle for him to get back on the field.
right,
This offseason surgery, in light of the fact that he really has not played much since the end of last season, is worrisome to me. Now, I don't know the specifics of it, so I don't want to necessarily drop him too low. And full disclosure, I did just draft him recently, I think, in the 11th round, 11th, 12th round. But it does give me some pause. You know, it's one thing to draft a handcuff. It's another thing to draft an injured handcuff or one that maybe we can place the label on as injury prone. So this is a story that
right,
we need to follow very, very closely. We both love Chris Carson this year. And in many formats, knowing how violently Chris Carson runs and how often injured he is. And sometimes these are just knick-knack injuries where he just misses one or two games. It's nice having
right,
that handcuff in an offense that you know is going to produce. And when healthy, I think that Penny is a very athletic and skilled running back that would do well in that
right,
offense. And we know
right.
how I feel about the Seattle offense this year. So,
I mean, so for me, and you kind of made a few of the points that I would make for why I actually am still on him. One of
mhm.
the first reasons is he's still being drafted so late. We're not talking about somebody you're drafting to potentially put in your starting lineup. Even before when we were still getting good news about practicing, we weren't drafting him to make him our day one starter. We were literally drafting him to kind of handcuff Chris Carson and kind of get a piece of that offense. And I think for me personally, I was trying to sell, everybody on him just the fact that, he still has that great pedigree. He's a first round draft pick running back. He was just drafted
Facts.
2, 3 years ago, so he's still young. The Seahawks didn't really bring any major competition in there to back up
Facts.
Carson. So for me, it's almost like they had a feel of comfort in Penny. Like, even though he's had these issues, they still feel good enough going into the season with Penny being the back. And now keep in mind, Carson himself is not, known to be very healthy. He always tends to miss, a game or two or whatnot due to injury. So that was kind of showing to me that Penny actually, was maybe coming back right. I think I read some article where Carson was saying he felt that him and Penny was the best rushing duo in the league. I mean, it's a little bit of hyperbole, but just the fact that he felt confident speaking of Penny
Yeah.
like that. And again, with this news, for me, it's actually a good thing. Because what does that mean? That means people might kind of sleep on him a little bit. He'll drop even further. And one point that you did make, and we can kind of move on after this, is you said that, he might miss a game or two or three or four. For me, even if he missed 5, 6 games, if he comes back near the back end of the season and he has fresh legs, and say he happens to get, maybe something happens to Carson, happens to get that role, that could be a league winner. That could be somebody that can actually win games in the playoffs
Yeah.
and you end up utilizing in the tournament. So, and
Those I
again,
think
the talent is there, so.
those are all great facts. Those are all great points. And one thing that I think we're going to get into on later podcasts is the understanding the importance and the significance of adding an extra game into the season. I don't really think it's
Yep.
been talked about as much, and I think there are so many different angles and so many different plays on this now being a 17 game season as opposed to 16
Right.
games. So there's a
Right.
podcast I think we should really dedicate towards the
No, I
importance of
agree.
that and how we can
I
take
agree.
advantage of that in drafts. Because I definitely, that's something that uh, I have intentionally been incorporating into how I approach drafts thus far this year. This is
100%
why we
agree.
work well
Yeah.
together, I think. The opposing views, the contrarian views to one another,
Yeah.
because I'm ready to cast aside this guy that I was so high on, but you pulled me back in and you brought in some very good, strong, and valid points that I think
Right,
have
right.
talked me off the ledge. So let's get into the actual show. Chris is going to
Okay.
hate this. We're already like 20, 30 minutes in, and we haven't even gone over the main
Right.
the main talking
It's
points
all
of the
right. He
show.
enjoys it. It's fun for him,
So
so he'll be
yeah,
all right.
he'll be all right. He'll be all right. So one of the hot and trending topics this week, call it controversial if you will, has been stacks. And I've
Right.
just seen a lot of views and takes on stacks. And
Right,
so,
right.
it's first let's define a stack. Dale, how would you
Okay.
define stack?
So I actually did kind of look this up because I didn't want to just kind of come off the top of the head. So I kind of looked up what the internet is saying the way you define stacks, right? So
Okay,
this
that's
is what it
interesting.
said.
Okay.
So so stacking or a stack basically refers to multiple players from the same team. Very
Okay.
basic and simple, right? Multiple players. That's two plus, so it could be
Mm-hmm.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, all
And I
on the
think we
same
both
team,
agree with that. Okay.
right? And then I also looked at the benefit of stacking. What was listed as the reason people would even want to do this strategy in general, right? So here's what it said. Stacking is making use of correlated plays in order to maximize the potential points your fantasy team can score,
I
right?
love the
So it's
definition.
basically about correlation. It's about
I
correlation,
love that
right?
definition.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
so yeah,
and the very last point of that, maximizing your team's potential points, I think is key. So
hmm
stacking can be used in any format and can be successful in any format, whether it's, your home leagues, redraft, whether it's
DFS
best
for
ball.
me. DFS
Yeah,
was kind of where I used to implement it the most, so in my
exactly.
draft team and everything.
DFS, whether it's high stake leagues, I think it could be used in
hmm
any format, but I think it's very important to understand the definition and to understand what you're trying to achieve and to try and play out the entire season. So for best ball, I think it's pretty straightforward. You
Yeah,
stack a team in hopes that that team outperforms their ADP. So if we look
right.
at years past, who would have been the team to stack last year, you think?
Like the Chiefs, teams with these crazy offenses.
No, I mean for specifically, who would have been the team to stack last year for 2020? If you had to go back and do it again, and you were going to create a
Oh,
stack, now, who's the team that you would have stacked for 2020?
you're probably looking at what the Bills,
Yeah.
Diggs and Josh Allen, your Kylers and
Mm-hmm.
your D Hops,
Mm-hmm.
those type of players, your Tyreek Hills, your Travis Kelce's, and your Mahomes type of combinations.
Exactly. So some stacks are easier to come by than others. If you want to try
Right.
and get a Kansas City stack, a Chiefs stack, you're going to be
You got to
spending a
pay
lot
for
of
it.
draft capital. Okay. You're going to be
Yep.
missing out on some other players.
Right.
Getting a Bill stack, you mentioned two players, Diggs and Josh Allen. And I don't think you mentioned anyone
Last
else
year
in
they
that.
were going late. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's only two players. Whereas with the Chiefs, we talk, when people talk about stacks, they talk about Mahomes, obviously, and then some combination of Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, or even CEH. So it's
CH.
important to also
Yep.
understand that when you stack, you can stack a wide receiver, you can stack a tight end, and probably a less owned stack or a stack that's less popular is a quarterback and a running back. And for
Eh,
obvious reasons, because the quarterback
eh.
may take away from the running back. My view of
Right.
stacking is that, if we're looking at high stakes, in most high stake leagues, the last 3 weeks, excluding the very last week of the season, the last 3 weeks again are what we call the money weeks. Those are when your total points are accumulated over a 3 week period. Okay. So that's when you want your players going off. So certain stacks to me make it extremely difficult for you to maximize that value, i.e., having a quarterback and having two wide receivers on that same team or two receiving options on that same team. Now, it's possible that two wide receivers on the same team have 3 great weeks, but I think it's difficult. So
Right.
the idea of having Kelsey, Mahomes, and Tyreek Hill, yes, sounds great. And if I could start off my
Sounds
team
great.
with that,
Yeah.
you're not going to lose a league with that. But wouldn't I rather have Devontae Adams, Travis Kelsey, and Patrick Mahomes?
Right.
Because that allows me to have a situation where Devontae has no impact whatsoever on Travis Kelsey, and Travis Kelsey has no impact whatsoever on Devontae Adams. And in essence,
They can both
I'm
go off together.
maximizing my value. Exactly. So yes, the Chiefs can go up any week, and they can score 7 touchdowns. Tyreek Hill can score 3. Kelsey can score 2. CH gets 1. Maybe Mahomes runs in a touchdown. Everybody goes off. But then to bank on that 3 weeks in a row to me is tough. So for me, I like to ideally stack with 2 players, 3 if I see a situation where it can really pay off and the cost isn't as expensive.
I'm a 2-stack guy. For me, honestly, it's really only the quarterback and receiver one that I even care to stack. I feel like any other player you add, to some extent, you're capping yourself somewhere. Because think about it, you're basically saying, if you get multiple receivers and say they do max out, you're basically saying, number one, your quarterback just went off, do at least 4 touchdowns. Because for me, if a wide receiver goes off, I would say maybe 2 touchdowns, 1.5, 2 touchdowns, right? So if you have 2 receivers, you're basically saying you want your quarterback to have thrown 4 touchdowns, and 2 of those touchdowns, or those 4 have to have been concentrated. Don't even let me say it like that. 2 of those touchdowns have to have gone to each one of those guys, because that will allow you to have, where it benefits you where at 2 receivers. Exactly. If that's not the case, it's better to have that one receiver that maybe scored 3 touchdowns, or maybe all 4. You know what I'm saying? Or got the maximum amount of touchdowns, and have another player somewhere else that happens to do better than that, that other stacked player, wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 or tight end. Again, you said it. I can see how it can help you win leagues or win games during the league. But when you're talking about those money leagues, you're trying to get the most amount of points from every position.
And the other point that I want to bring up about stacks is I don't want to pay for expensive stacks. I want the cheap stack.
Right.
I want the stack that, if you're in a best ball tournament, is ideally less owned. Now with the mass entry in best ball tournaments and with how large a field that is, it's going to be hard to find a quote unquote unique stack. So when you create a stack, to me, I think you want to be simple and you want to have some variance and diversify around that stack. I also like the idea of multiple stacks. And you can do that if you approach stacks that are cheap. You can get a San Francisco and a Miami stack. Or you can maybe go for a little bit more expensive stack and a lower stack. So there's one stack that I think we have been in love with all offseason. And I think that's one stack that I definitely want to talk about tonight, and that's the Seattle Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are a very affordable stack, but the quarterback position, which is typically centered let me start that over, sorry. I lost my train of thought real quick. All right. So one stack that I definitely want us to cover tonight and want us to talk about are the Seattle Seahawks. This is a team and a stack that I think we have been all over all offseason. Stacks are usually centered around the quarterback position. So you have a quarterback and then you're stacking him usually with the wide receiver. It's usually not the other way around, and we're usually not revolving a stack around a running back. But obviously the quarterback for the Seahawks is Russell Wilson. I think Russell Wilson is a very polarizing player within the fantasy realm. And it may not be necessarily Russell Wilson himself, but what we all view is the philosophy of the Seahawks offense. Exactly. So is it a situation where we're going to let Russ cook, or is it a situation where Pete Carroll is going to dictate that this be a run-based offense? Because we've seen it year after year. Some years he starts off hot and then cools down. Some years he starts off cold and heats up. Obviously, if he's in a game where he needs to come from behind, typically that's a game where obviously we're going to see some fourth quarter magic, but we don't want to just see fourth quarter magic. We want to see that second, third, and fourth. So my view on Russell Wilson heading into 2021, reading through the tea leaves, understanding the signing at the offensive coordinator position, understanding the drama.
Speak on that. They did bring in the Rams offensive coordinator,
Shane Waldron.
Correct. So, right.
Exactly. And if you go through his background, it is pretty much an offensive background and a lot of work within the passing coordinator positions at various stops along the way. So,
obviously he's coming from Sean McVay too. So, when you come from Sean McVay, you get that golden touch. So,
yeah, at the very least, it's going to be balanced, but definitely not someone who has been brought through or been breaded in a run-heavy scheme. So for me, these are all positive news. But again, getting back to Russell Wilson throughout the offseason, at that time was the Russell Wilson saga, as far as him giving out different teams that he would like to be traded to. Obviously, he sort of pulled back on that to some degree. I haven't demanded a trade, but if they were going to trade me, these were the teams that I wanted to go to. But obviously, the two sides have come together. So for them to bring in this offensive coordinator, for Russell to now obviously be in love with Pete Carroll, and these are guys that are, we assumed at some point they were going to come together. But I think they've come to some agreement. And I think that agreement is that they're going to have some balance. We saw Russell Wilson have times last year. We saw Russell Wilson at times last year have a lot of difficulty reading the field at times, or staying in the pocket too long. With the only thought of looking downfield and throwing deep routes. And so I think what we've heard is that they want to incorporate that quick spread offense, or maybe not necessarily spread offense, but quicker pace offense. Get the ball out.
A quick decision type offense. Get the ball out.
Exactly. More of a West Coast style offense. So I'm loving that, especially with the weapons that he has in place. Okay. So the main reason I really love this stack, though, and I think this is going to surprise a lot of people, is not because of DK Metcalf. It's not even because of Tyler Lockett. It's because of Gerald Everett. So in an FFPC format, a tight-end premium format, I love where Gerald Everett is going. I love where Russell Wilson is going. You know who I equate Russell Wilson to this year? I think he's our 2021 version of the 2020 Deshaun Watson. Remember when DeAndre Hopkins left and we saw Watson's value plummet? Our first thought was, we don't think people understand how bad a man this dude is.
Right. Yeah.
And our first thought
and
our first thought was this again was a situation of addition by subtraction. You're removing his safety blanket. You're removing his tunnel vision. And now the entire field is opened up to him. We still had the Will Fuller. They brought in Brandon Cooks. They brought in Randall Cobb. We still had Kiki Kuti. And honestly, it really didn't even matter who was on the field. Russell Wilson is a bad –
he was playing with Chad Hansen.
Exactly.
Chad Hansen's out there with them.
Exactly.
Just no names. So, yeah.
So I view Russell Wilson very much like that again, that sort of kind of elite quarterback, or the guy who can give you elite week-winning ability, but is being drafted below that tier, so we're getting him at value. So I love the fact that I can stack him with the Tyler Lockett, who will go anywhere in the late to sixth round, stack him with the Gerald Everett, who goes in double-digit rounds. And then again, if you want to, grab a DK Metcalf, you can definitely do that. But to me, that's an ideal stack. And this is a situation where I don't mind stacking my running back with my quarterback, because I think we're getting all of these positions at great value. And I think both can succeed at any given week. And we saw Chris Carson also get incorporated into the passing game last year. So that's definitely one of my favorite stacks.
So right now, DK Metcalf is going like in the back end of the second, the early to mid third. You're getting Carson in the back end of the third all the way to the back end of the fourth. I don't think that's going to fall to the fifth yet, but he might have. You get Tyler Lockett in. Where are you getting Lockett now? The 6, 7? I don't think he's going. Maybe the 5th.
His ADP is risen, I think, over the last few weeks. We're now seeing him go towards
the 5th.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're getting Lockett in the fifth, and you're getting Russ. I mean, you get Russ just depending on how the draft ends up going. You can get Russ anywhere between the sixth and the ninth. I think I maybe
Yeah,
even seen it go as far down as the 10th. So
yeah,
yeah, you can definitely, and then every you can get every in a mid double digit round, so 12, 13, 14, 15. Once you get
yeah,
that late, people are just kind of picking random tight ends. So
yeah.
you can definitely get all the pieces of that offense and kind of decide how you want to stack. Now again, me personally, I wouldn't get a whole bunch of pieces all for the same team. You
Mhm.
said you like Everett with Russ, which is cool. I think you're higher on Everett than I am right now.
Yeah,
Because for me, they still got Will Dissly there. I mean, I know he's had injury problems, but there was a time where Will Dissly was a bad man, and
yeah,
he was producing.
yeah.
So I
Well,
don't want to just totally write him off.
yeah, and I like the continuity. I like the fact that with Shane Waldron coming in, Gerald Everett coming from
That
the
is
same
yeah,
system, and
right.
Pete
That is a
Carroll
big plus.
commented on that specifically. I hate the fact that that quote came out because I think now we're starting to see Everett's ADP
It woke
rise.
some
So I
people up.
love the fact,
Yeah,
yeah, I love the fact that I could just snag him very late. That
right,
likely
right.
no longer going to be the case, but I hope news starts to fade and ADP changes. So
I
we'll
think
see
it's
what
slightly
happens with that.
still under the rug, so I think you're gonna be okay. So I don't think it's gonna be too bad.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
as far as me personally,
Yeah.
for my stack with the Seahawks, I prefer Russ and Lockett.
Okay. I like that one too. I
We
like
could
that
say
one.
we could say DK is the wide receiver one, and he probably is by production as far as what he's done in the last 2 years. But early in the season, I mean, Lockett was getting quite a bit of targets. He was honestly
Absolutely.
operating target wise like he was the wide receiver one.
Yeah. And
He
I
was
hear,
scoring a fair amount of touchdowns too.
yeah, I hear a lot of people reference how DK fell off or how Tyler Lockett had boom bust weeks. And I think a lot of that was
Right,
just based off the byproduct of the offense. It was based off of that
right,
offensive scheme. And I think a lot of that, again, if you if we go down Narrative Street, I'm gonna make this a short street. If we go down Narrative Street of what happened with the Seahawks last year, I think they started off the season by letting Russ cook, but I think their defense was not where Pete Carroll wanted it to be for whatever
hmm
reason, and the
right,
defense couldn't keep up with the offense, and as a result, Pete Carroll had to dial back the offense, move to a more run focused, ball control offense so that he could get his defense where it needed to be. And then eventually
right.
that's what ended up happening. So I think it was more of a situation where Pete Carroll, you know, basically brought the offense, moved the offense away from this, fast paced, downfield, play action pass, and more so towards a heavy run offense.
He
And
basically took Russ out the kitchen, basically.
exactly. And as a
No
result,
more
we saw the
cooking.
production for both wide receivers take a hit. But you cannot
Right,
use you can't use the same thought process going into 2021 because it's a different offense. So
right.
I think by having this more West Coast offense, by getting the ball out quicker, uh, I think what it does is it allows less volatility on a week to week basis
Okay.
DK Lock between DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So I think everyone benefits from this
Now,
transition.
I don't want to understate that part of the reason their defense improved last year because they made that trade for Quadri Diggs, um, former UT alum like you. I think they got him from, I want to say, what are the Vikings? Maybe it was the Vikings or the Lions. But he's a pretty solid safety. And, he
Yeah,
was able to kind of team up with Jamal Adams back there. So that definitely kind of helped benefit their
yeah.
defense. Um, definitely, and you did kind of allude to it last year. Russ was cooking in a lot of games where the defense was just basically just failing the team. So he was
Mhm.
kind of similar to kind of like what we were saying with Dak. He was trying to
Mhm.
play that comeback. Matter of fact, one of the games it was Cowboys versus Seahawks where they both kind of
Yep.
put up crazy stats. So
Yeah.
so definitely, I don't want to undermine that because I do believe their defense will be better this year. And I'm kind of saying that while Jamal Adams and Diggs, the guy that I just spoke, are actually talking about holdouts. But I
Yeah.
do think their defense will be better. But like you said, that offensive coordinator that they just brought over, me and you, we definitely expect the offense to function and produce quite a bit better. So I definitely
Yeah,
agree with
absolutely.
being
So
on
before we
Russ.
move on to the next topic, is there a stack that you have in mind that you want to share with the audience, or are you still holding that close to the vest? Putting you on.
I don't have to hold it close to the vest at all.
Okay.
No. And you kind of already know who my favorite stack is. What are you talking about? The guy that I've been trying to get
Oh,
into drafts with, to specifically draft, and that's my
okay.
boy AJ Brown.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the quarterback he just is blessed to play with, it literally could have been anybody. As long as they can run a little bit,
Yeah.
which AJ Brown's quarterback can do.
Hmm.
Um, then he's a good option. And obviously, you add Julio. I mean, that does nothing but help him out. Even before the
Uh-huh.
Julio trade, remember I used to, kind of talk to you and say, hey, once that trade goes down, or if it goes down, we should expect Tannehill's value to kind of shoot up. And I don't think it's
Yeah.
shot up that much in drafts. I
Yeah.
don't
It
really understand why,
varies.
but it does vary. It does vary. But for me, I mean, that's my favorite stack, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
And I
want to
think
say that, and all of a sudden I'm not going to be able to get it anymore. But
yeah.
that's definitely the stack I like to target.
Yeah, we use that motto, you don't got to get ready if you stay ready. And I think that's a
Right,
perfect example, that Julio trade where you were very high on AJ Brown and you just kept hitting home the fact that if they trade Julio, he may move higher in my rankings, but I'm going to love it because I
right,
think his ADP is going to be depressed. And you played that news
right.
perfectly because you held off on grabbing AJ as much as you wanted to in the early
Hmm.
second, knowing that his ADP would fall, and now you've been able to acquire quite a few shares. That's just again, if you can
Yes,
kind of
sir.
anticipate the news, the news is going to drop. If you can anticipate the news, you can play it. We saw that with the Saquon
Right,
Barkley. We didn't
right.
even talk about the video all that
What?
much, but as soon as this video drops, I mean, the man looked amazing. From
Yeah.
someone who's come back from 2 ACL injuries, you can watch his video and then you can watch other players' videos that I don't want to get into necessarily on this podcast just yet. You can watch other
Hmm.
players' ACL return videos and you can just see a huge difference. There's almost
Right.
no hesitation. There's almost no hitch. It's very fluid. And as you brought up before, he's not wearing the brace. Those are things that we love to
Oh
see.
yeah. No
So
brace. No brace.
just
When
like
I
we
saw
talked
that, I
about
was
it,
like all
yeah,
in.
exactly. So like we talked about in our earlier podcast, knowing his upside, knowing that he's going
Mm.
so late in drafts right now, get him now, okay? Because as soon as he starts
Yep.
participating in training camp, his ADP is going to go back up to the top 3. I just guarantee it. He's going
Yep.
to finish, he's going to finish in the top 3, if not top 2, and if not
Right.
overall number 1 in some drafts. Okay.
Right.
All right. So
And
go
real
ahead.
quick, before we move on, that point
Yeah.
you're just making right there, I don't really see anything that can happen that would make his ADP go any lower.
Yeah.
So
This
this
is
is
about
honestly
another.
like his floor. Like if you're even considering Barkley, if you're doing, multiple entries, this is the time to get him because it's gonna go nowhere but up from here. So
Yeah.
definitely, and
Yeah.
that's a special talent. So definitely don't
You know
sleep
what?
on that.
I'm going to write that down. We're going to dedicate a pod to guys whose ADP we will anticipate or guys whose ADP we anticipate to rise throughout the offseason. And then even maybe vice versa, guys who we anticipate their ADP will
Where's the
drop
lower
based off of just news that we can almost with certainty
forecast?
forecast, and that will drop at some point throughout the offseason.
Yeah,
So, you
yeah.
almost had a Freudian slip earlier when you were mentioning the name. And so we're going to get into this next topic here. And I know it's a guy that you were very
Okay,
high on. So the
okay.
next topic, last week we talked about Big Ben and whether or not he could support 3 wide receivers. And obviously there's a lot of change going on in Pittsburgh. There's another team with a similar layout as far as the wide receiving talent.
Hmm.
And that team is the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yep,
So
yep, yep.
give us your take, give us your view on the Cincinnati Bengals.
I'm a big fan.
Okay.
Jamar Chase.
Yeah.
Like huge fan. Ever since I watched him during his last season at LSU, that championship run with Burrow.
Okay.
Just watching because it's crazy because I actually went into watching LSU highlights to watch Burrow to kind of see what kind of quarterback he's been, and I felt like every highlight I was watching actually it was more of a Jamar Chase highlight, and literally from
Okay.
that point on, I was like, okay, this guy right here is somebody I have to definitely keep my eye on, and obviously he's kind of become what he's become. But anyways, they also have T. Higgins, which I'm also very high on.
Yep.
I would say I'm
Surprisingly
higher
high
than
on.
most, but Yeah, I
Yeah,
would say I'm higher than most, but from the news that I've been seeing lately, it's almost like other people are starting to talk him up a little bit. And,
yeah.
sometimes that
I
kind of
think I
annoys me.
think
Like, dang, that was
I
my
think you
guy.
were very high on him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then they also got Tyler Boyd, which I like talent wise. I'm
Yeah.
just not as high on him as maybe you would are, or really
Yeah.
the fantasy community or consensus. So
Yeah.
those are the three weapons they have. Now I do want to mention they have other weapons, but really one
Yep.
other weapon I think that matters. But, maybe a couple other they have.
Yep.
Auden Tate, who
Yep.
is a player I'm actually a fan of. He has,
Oh, love
a
Autumn. Love Autumn
wide
too.
catch radius,
Yep.
big body player. Been with them
Yeah.
for about 3-4 years now.
Great fourth
Kind
receiver.
of worked his way up. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, worked his way up a little bit. Got a fair amount of playing time last year, and he did well. He did really
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
He doesn't have draft capital or the investment in him, so they're not going to play him over those top three. Then they still have the
Absolutely.
Titans. They have C.J. Azuma, who was
Hmm.
actually hurt last year. And then they
Yep.
have Drew Sample, who was a
Yep.
rookie last year. I think he was a second round pick, maybe a third round, but I really believe it was a second round pick. I
Yeah.
wasn't
But
really high on him, but
we saw Drew Sample last year. You don't even have to let's
yeah, yeah. So I wasn't
irrelevant.
high on him, but so that
Yeah.
was cool. But so yeah, so their three main targets are, you know, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Tyler Boyd in that order for me.
Okay.
So because me personally, I feel like Boyd is gonna kind of lose a little bit of his value this year because I feel like Chase is gonna take that possession role from him. I feel like Higgins is still gonna be what he is and maybe even get better.
Yeah.
And there's only one football that can go around, so that's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at with it.
Okay. So you feel like Burrow cannot support all three of these wide receivers. You feel like somebody's gonna
I
take a hit.
I do not think he can. I do not.
Okay.
Now I say this always in the beginning of the season, but injuries happen.
Yeah.
Um, so it
Of
might work its
course.
way
Of
out,
course.
but from day one, I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let me start off with Jamar Chase. I almost don't want to say this because it's being recorded, and the last thing I want is this to be replayed in 2022, and they say this is the dude that said he didn't like Jamar Chase. So let me get this correct, okay?
Especially, man. What are you talking about,
Yeah,
man?
yeah.
He's a
It's not that I
superhero.
don't like Jamar Chase. Uh, I have a different view from my film study of watching Jamar Chase. Um,
Okay.
I saw him running an offense that literally just where he was just basically running wide open. He was oftentimes in single coverage against smaller DBs. Athleticism, yes, off the chart. Catch radius, off the chart. Hands, very good. I don't necessarily know that they're elite. I didn't see anything that necessarily made it elite. So for me, it's very tough to say that he's just going to come into the league and dominate. Is he going to come in
Okay.
and do very well? I can see that. Is he going to come in and have a Justin
Okay.
Jefferson type year? I think that's tough. And I think that's where he's being drafted now with the thought that he's going to come in and produce numbers like Justin Jefferson did. And Justin Jefferson started off very slowly, like most rookies
Yeah.
did last year in a COVID. So for Justin Jefferson to produce the numbers that he did, I mean, it's just absolutely mind-boggling. It's
Now,
just
now, now, wait. Don't forget. Jefferson was Chase's teammate
I
last
know,
season at
I
LSU,
know,
and Chase was
I know.
the number one receiver over Jefferson.
I
So when you
understand. I understand,
compare
but
those two direct players, some I don't know,
so
maybe.
things like that. So things like that for me are very tough to assess on the next level because you being the number one receiver in that offense to me does not necessarily mean that your game is going to translate at a higher level than the guy who's the number two receiving option in that offense. From a standpoint, again, you're playing in college. Many of these players are just schemed open. They're put in excellent positions to succeed. And I'm not taking anything away from Chase. He did exactly what he
Okay.
was supposed to do. He dominated that competition. He took advantage of having 5 to 10 yards of separation. And part of that is him. Okay. Part of that is his speed. Part of that is, to me, his route
Right.
running was good, but I didn't think it was like excellent. I think it was, Devontae
I
Smith
mean,
type. But
no,
so,
no, it wasn't that at all.
okay, yeah. And I'm not saying it was bad. I'm just, I just didn't think it was elite. So again, how well he's going to translate to the NFL, I think he's going to do great. But is he going to do Justin Jefferson type great? Is he going to pay off
Right.
his potential fourth round ADP. That to me is hard to stomach. And I think if you want him, that's where you got to get him. Occasionally we see him go in the fifth, but that's tough to me. So I do think that he takes over the AJ Green role, and we saw AJ Green amass over 100 targets. I do fully expect him to do more with those targets, have a higher per target fantasy point production than AJ Green did last year. I don't think it's hard for anyone to really do that.
AJ Green really didn't produce much. I mean, he was getting a lot of targets
at all.
But as far as production, he really wasn't doing much of nothing.
So I basically expect him to take that role. I expect Higgins to pretty much play the same role he played, and I expect Boyd to play the slot. And for me, there's a couple reasons why I'm high on Boyd. The one is the obvious, which is just his ADP. You can get him in the 8th round. He doesn't cost you anything.
Right.
2 is he is elite in his own right. When it comes to slot receivers, go and look at the numbers. Over the last 3 to 4 years, he is elite. He is absolutely elite. His athleticism, his size, his route running, what he can do from the slot, to me, is something that I doubt will just fade away heading into the 2021 season. The third aspect of this is the fact that Joe Burrow, which we haven't really touched on, is coming off a very significant ACL injury. He is still wearing the brace. They didn't even want running backs lining up in the backfield because they didn't want anybody coming close to that brace. So the idea that this Burrow is just going to be, 5, 7 step dropbacks or rolling out and bootleg, he may get to that point, but I think they're going to be very cautious. And I think we need to be cautious.
No, I agree.
It's where Joe Mixon may be the value out of all of these guys. But I see Boyd in this, during this season being a safety blanket and someone who Joe Burrow would be looking to very fast and very often, trying to get the ball out as quick as he can to try and protect that knee. Because it's going to take him a while. It takes a player a while to get used to that ACL. I think quarterbacks are just different. There's just a certain nuance, when it comes to pocket presence, when it comes to feeling comfortable with your dropbacks, being under center, because people are just running in and around your leg. Your own linemen are running in and around your leg. And I think it takes a certain amount of comfort to get used to that. So I doubt that he's just going to want to be spending a large amount of time, in the pocket. The last reason I think
they really don't even have the greatest offensive line either.
Exactly, that was my next point. Their offensive line. Like, how much time is he really going to have to throw? I do think their offensive line improves. We are big on offensive line continuity. So an offensive line can have a poor grade 1 year, but if they return the same starters, especially if they're young, I think there's a decent chance that we see a significant step up. Yeah, so because more oftentimes than not, there's some draft capital there. So it just takes, sometimes it takes offensive lines a little bit of time to gel. It takes players a little bit of time to mature. So they should get better, but they're not going to be, they'll still be well below average, I believe.
Right.
My last point is something that is just going to be related to who they match up against. Jamar Chase is going to see a team's number 1 cornerback. Okay. Unless the Patriots, maybe then it is, double bracket in the wide receiver 2 season, number 1 quarter. But for the most part, he's going to see their number 1 quarterback.
Right.
Going through
tough competition.
Exactly. And they're in a tough division. Okay. They play the Browns. They got some nasty DBs. They play the Steelers. Steelers DBs are hurting, but they still have Joe Hayden back there. And they still have, who's the other guy?
They let go, or they haven't re-signed Steven Nelson.
And I don't think they're bringing him back. I think they're very high on. I'm blanking on his name right now, but I think they're high on the second year DB. But either way, Joe Hayden will likely be covering Jamar Chase. Then they also play the Broncos, and the Baltimore Ravens, and we already know what their defensive backfield looks like. But I mean, you can go kind of through that season. So I think he's going to be seeing the opposing team's number 1 DB. I don't think Justin Jefferson was seeing the opposing team's number 1 defensive back or number 1 cornerback last year. I think Adam Thielen was seeing that, which almost makes Adam Thielen about it.
I think it varied. I think it varied through the season, actually. I think that's because he started to become a thing.
Yeah, towards the end of the season. So for me, I think, the cornerback schedule for Tyler Boyd, when we look at the slot corners that he's going to be coming up against, I think it's a very favorable schedule. So for me, I'm buying. And the production, just year in and year out, I think Tyler Boyd is an excellent buy at his 8th round ADP. Rebuttal? Or are you on my side now? You like Tyler Boyd?
But so here's the thing though, like right now, okay, we can talk about real life fantasy. Real life football and him being a safety
Mm-hmm.
blanket and how useful he's going to be. But the question is more so framed in the value of fantasy. And in fantasy football, you get your points not only for catching yardage and touchdowns. And if I was to
Mm-hmm.
rank those three receivers, I truly would rank it with the mindset of I believe Chase and Higgins are going to get more yardage and more touchdowns compared to Boyd. Now, definitely, I do see Boyd as a safety blanket, kind of like your Cole Beasley type player, if you will. But when it comes to the money and the true fantasy point, I think that's going to be all Chase and Higgins, all day long. So I would
Yeah.
still rank Boyd below all three of them. And if they're in the red zone, yeah, Boyd is great in the short area, but who do you think is going to get the targets in the red zone out of those three?
That's one thing
Personally, I
I
think it's
think he
Chase.
definitely excelled in. Yeah, I think Chase excels in the red zone. That is
Yeah.
one
So
place where I
so
think
so
he's
so
really
when I'm saying okay, who do I want or because remember I'm not saying Burrow can't support three receivers just in general. I'm talking about can Burrow support three fantasy valuable receivers? And I don't know. Not to mention Mixon. They're saying they're going to use him in the passing game a fair amount more this season. So that kind of cuts the pie up a little bit more. Again, CJ Uzuma's coming back. We don't know what they're going to do with him. He was their starting tight end last year. They might like him. We don't know. Remember, like we always say, it doesn't matter what we
yeah.
think; it's what the coaches think. So,
So
so is he going to get support all three? I don't think so. And if I was to put my money on two of them, I would say it's Chase
yeah,
and Higgins. So,
yeah. I'll leave this discussion at this. I think before his injury last year, he was on pace to for 500 passing attempts. So,
you mean Burrow? Yeah. He
yeah,
was.
yeah,
It was some kind of game
yeah,
record he was on
yeah,
pace
yeah.
for.
Which is obviously at the higher end of the league when it comes to passing attempts. So I don't necessarily see much of that changing from a standpoint of their defense is really not any better. If anything, it may be worse. Uh,
Yeah.
and they play in a very tough division where 6 games are going to be against playoff teams. They may not
Right.
all
Right.
make the
Right.
playoffs. They have playoff talent on those teams. So they're going to be
Do you know
behind
if
a
they
lot.
changed any of their coaches or anything?
Say what?
Did they change any of their coaches? Like any
The
offensive
Bengals?
coordinators or anything? Yes.
No, they're keeping
Or
the
are they pretty much
same
the same
same
system?
head coach,
Okay.
same offensive coordinator. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in
Okay.
2022, whether or not that same coaching
Gotcha.
staff sticks around. But all right, so
Gotcha.
okay, so you're not
Okay.
a fan of Tyler Boyd. You hate Tyler Boyd. I hate Jamar Chase. No,
Nah, man,
people,
chill,
that's
chill.
not the case. That's not the case. We're gonna edit that from the
Chill
from
out.
the
Nah, I did not say that. I
podcast.
did not say that.
But again, yeah. So Deo is a fan of the talent and the potential fantasy production of Jamar Chase and Tyler and T Higgins. He loves where they're going in drafts. I think I've seen you draft T Higgins far too often for my liking, but that lets me know that is a player that that you have placed your stake on, that a player that
Right.
you really believe in. So to me, that
Right.
speaks volumes. So I'll probably get some shares just because of that alone. And for me, Tyler Boyd, especially if I, am drafting a lot of running backs, he's a player that I'm looking for late that can provide me some decent
So
floor
let me ask you
PPR.
this. Let me ask you this.
Yeah,
Between Tyler Boyd and Jarvis Landry, which way do you lean? Like
I'm
right
going
now.
Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd.
Tyler
Tyler Boyd.
Boyd?
This is
Okay.
two different offenses. I think with Jarvis, their numbers may appear the same towards the end of the year, although I doubt it. My problem with Jarvis is obviously we have OBJ returning. I do think they're opening
Mm-hmm.
up the offense a little bit more, but it is still a very, very much run-based offense. They have a very, very good defense. a ball controlled offense. So sometimes they just don't have to throw. And so guessing those games may be very, very difficult. So you are putting yourself in a tough position where you're going to see Jarvis go, 2 for 10, and players like that avoid.
The only reason why I think you should consider Landry a little bit more is because, a few reasons. Number one, the target competition in Cleveland is a lot less.
I don't know. Cincy does not have tight ends. Cleveland has 3 tight ends.
Really? You mean Hooper? Well, okay, yeah.
Hooper's great. Come on now.
Yeah, you're right. He produced a little bit
last year.
You're right. You're right.
I was seeing plenty of targets towards the end of last year. And then Njoku is a very athletic tight end. Tight ends.
Good.
He's only going to get better, and we start to see him down the stretch. And then they have Harrison Bryant. Who knows? So, and we know they run 12 personnel sets, and they pass to their tight ends, especially in the red zone. So, Tyler Boyd for me. I love.
You made a good point.
Yeah, trash. The fourth quarter garbage point. So,
let's talk a little bit of the Panthers. The Joe Brady offense. Yes, we do. Because I got some. I'm a fan of some of the players over there. Quite a few actually. But so we wanted to kind of basically talk a little Sam Darnold specifically. But the question is, does C-Mac, DJ Moore, and Roby, do they elevate Darnold's fantasy value, or is Darnold going to actually bring all of their fantasy values down?
I think there's no significant change between him and Bridgewater. I understand that just from a talent standpoint, there may be higher upside.
So you think Darnold's more talented?
Maybe. The funny thing is I was a Darnold truther when he was coming out of
USC.
USC, yeah. I was a huge fan of his. I knew he was young, and he was had an issue with turnovers, but to me, I saw talent there. He could make all the throws. He was mobile enough. I felt like he moved well in the pocket, at least in college. He definitely made a few bonehead throws, some questionable throws, almost Winston style. But I was a huge fan. And then I'm just concerned that Gase broke him. I don't know if this is a situation where, like with so many former Gase players, they go on to greatness. But if he's going to do it any place, it's going to be here with Brady and in this particular offense. So it is a new fresh start. There is one thing that I think people aren't considering, not to get into controversial topics. Although you hit me up on Twitter if you want to. I'm joking. Don't come at me with controversial topics. But yeah, so he didn't want to disclose or acknowledge whether or not he had been vaccinated. Okay. One important aspect that I think we are not considering, not just with Sam Darnold, but with a lot of the NFL players, are their vaccination status. Again, not to get into controversial topics for those type of reasons, but I think it is relevant when it comes to fantasy. So, full disclosure, at the current moment in time, I am not taking into account whether or not a player is vaccinated. There's still plenty of time for them to get vaccinated. But I think it is something that is important to consider. Think back to last year with Cam Newton when he contracted COVID. Not only did he have to miss games, but there was also some talk that when he came back from those missed games, that he just wasn't himself. We've also seen with this very same player, Sam Darnold, who developed mono, he struggled. Another type viral illness. Now, I'm not saying there's a correlation there that if he gets COVID, that he's going to have the same issues. Mono is just a different beast. But still, that being said, that to me is something to think about when it's your quarterback. So, but let's get back to, again, the main question. This is a big question mark because, yes, Sam Darnold could end up being, I don't want to say elite, but well above average, play much better than he did when he was with the Jets and under Gase. My concern with the players in this offense, excluding CMC, he's number one overall pick for me, is that there are a lot of mouths to feed. And I don't necessarily know that we have a quarterback like we did with the Steelers, even with a broken down older Ben, or with Joe Burrow, someone coming off an ACL. I don't think we have a quarterback that can support this many options. And I do view Christian McCaffrey, unlike many other teams, as a weapon, significant weapon for the passing game. Yeah, meaning, i.e., 100 plus targets in a given year. So we have him, we have Robbie Anderson, we have DJ Moore. We just have a lot of mouths to feed, and we have our player, a guy that I think we've been collecting in drafts as of late, which is Dan Arnold. So, and then obviously you bringing in the rookie as well. Can he support all these mouths? I think it's going to be very, very tough. So,
I mean, but the only rebuttal I would have to that is last year they kind of had the same amount of mouths to feed. Now C-Mac did get hurt. C-Mac only played 3 games, week 1, week 2, and maybe week 9. So one week sometime during the season. But besides C-Mac, they had DJ Moore, they had Robbie Anderson, and they had Curtis Samuel.
Yeah.
They had, Ian Thomas was.
They had no time. They had no tight end.
Yeah, they had no tight end, but he was out there. So what this year they kind of lost Curtis Samuel. Really didn't bring anybody in. They brought in David Moore, who I don't know. Maybe we're kind of ignoring him. Or maybe
I don't want
it's not really a thing.
I don't want to ignore him.
Yeah, he's there. But besides that, you could say they removed Curtis Samuel and they're kind of inserting back in C-Mac. The mouths are not that different. Remember last year was Joe Brady's first season as offensive coordinator, and he was the offensive coordinator at LSU and with the Saints. He kind of has experience producing an offense that you can actually, support a lot of mouths, where you kind of spread it around because just how kind of creative he is with his offense. Me personally, I think the weapons around Darnold are so good that he is actually going to have a pretty okay season this year with the Panthers. I kind of think they set him up for success a little bit.
Okay, now let's not do what everybody does in terms of saying, okay, he's going to have an okay season. Okay. Because that doesn't mean much. That's like saying, okay, he's going to do well. Is he fantasy viable? Are you drafting him?
Who is Sam Darnold?
Sam Darnold.
No, hell no.
But you just told me he's going to
be on that free agent list, ready for the waiver ad if need be. But I'm not drafting. But you got to understand, when I look for quarterbacks, I'm looking for more so Konami codes.
Okay.
Or somebody that's so exceptional in the passing game, a la Matt Stafford, Tom Brady, that I'm going to produce, because quarterback is just such an important position to hit on in fantasy.
Okay.
It's one of the highest scoring positions. So, the thing about Sam Darnold, and the reason why we're even discussing him, is even if you don't draft him, I think he's going to be available long enough to where you feel like if you want him, you can grab him. Even if you want to draft him, you can probably draft him in the last round or two, and go ahead and secure his services. So I'm not going to draft him. He's not my cup of tea. But is he going to do better than probably what people think? I do think so. Is the weapons around him going to do well? I do think so. I don't think he's going to be a failure. And like you said, he had the talent at USC. He actually was in the running to be the #1 pick for a time, because that was the Baker Mayfield draft, remember? So they were even talking about maybe the Browns drafting Darnold. So we know he has talent. But
okay, let's put this in context. Okay, so let's put this in context. Again, I think we even skipped over Terrence Marshall, their rookie wide receiver.
Yeah, we did. But we actually did. You're right.
Yeah, but so CMC, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson. Okay, I guess we could put Terrence Marshall, and many people aren't, but we are including Dan Arnold. He's the guy. So these are the 5 guys that are being drafted right now. Okay, right. CMC. I want to ask you if their ADPs are appropriate. CMC, the 1.01.
Absolutely. Next question.
Okay. DJ Moore, 4th round.
I'm not as big of a DJ Moore fan as others.
How many shares of DJ Moore do you have?
I have none.
Okay, so that
But
means
if DJ
you
Moore
only
fell to the fifth,
have
I
0
would take
shares.
him.
Say
Yeah.
what?
But if DJ Moore fell to the fifth, I would take him.
Okay.
I might even consider him in the back end of the fourth. But where he's going, he's just not
Okay.
my cup of tea.
So he's not. So he's not producing 4th round value right now. Now, both know
That's
we're
me,
high
no.
on Robbie Anderson. Okay, so that's just
Right.
one area of value
You
where
get him in the 7th round.
7th or sometimes even 8th round. He's just excellent value.
Eighth.
He's getting disrespected, and maybe it's because of the rookie Terrence Marshall, who goes in a variety of different places, but usually towards the back end of the
Real
draft.
quick, people must have forgot that Robbie Anderson, however way you say it,
Yeah.
was with the Jets just 2 years ago.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He played for 2 years with the Jets with Darnold, so they already had their rapport.
Yeah.
So,
Fun fact, guess who the Carolina Panthers play opening day for 2021?
let me think. The Jets.
The Jets.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
we
good at
don't
that game.
necessarily always believe in revenge narrative. It's different for each player, but you got to assume,
Right.
come on, Sam Darnold
No.
and Robbie Anderson.
I think he's gonna be motivated. Yeah,
Yeah, come on.
they're both gonna be motivated. Yeah.
Come on.
Matter of
And
fact, you gotta get that stack right there.
Yeah, they got somewhat of a player's coach, so I would anticipate they're drawing up some plays at this very moment to try and get those guys the ball. But my whole thing is, again, I think based off of where a lot of these players are going, their ADPs are already kind of you have one guy who's a value, Terrence Marshall. Maybe you take a late round flyer on him, but no one's really anticipating that he's going to provide stable fantasy production, barring an injury. So we have Robbie Anderson that you're getting value.
He has talent though. He has talent though. I don't totally dismiss Terrence Marshall.
Yeah, but you're not going to feel comfortable starting him in your lineup.
Right, not yet. But he might have that Justin Jefferson type of ascension.
Okay. So,
but that's another discussion.
Exactly. So whether or not he can really elevate the play of these wide receivers, to me, there's a big question mark there. There's a big question mark.
Well, do you think he's better than Bridgewater? Because they had Bridgewater last year.
That's a tough question. Because that gets to our Drew Lock discussion, where I think it's very, very similar. I think he's better than Drew Lock. Now, is he a better real-life quarterback than Teddy Bridgewater? I think only time will tell. I don't think we know the answer to that yet. I can say that he's more skilled, but is he a better quarterback? I don't know. Sometimes NFL coaches and OCs want their quarterback to run the plays, and sometimes they want them to avoid making major mistakes, i.e. turning the ball over.
Right.
So if you can't turn the ball over, then automatically you are dropping down a significant amount of tiers when it comes to actual NFL play. So can he do that? This is the same guy that said he was seeing ghosts last year. So I don't know.
Right. That was 2 years ago, but yeah. But I mean, for me, I think he's definitely better than Bridgewater. And again, I'm speaking more from the fantasy kind of view, because Bridgewater, yes, he's probably more of a player that can lead your team, game manager, doesn't create a lot of turnovers, drive the ball down the field. But when we're trying to score fantasy points, we're looking for a quarterback that's gonna, let it rip, go downfield, strong arms, bam, 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 and then score passing touchdown. I don't think Teddy was doing much of that last year. I mean, he had a good amount of yardage. I know he got hurt one game, but as far as really just kind of letting it rip, he really wasn't doing that. That's kind of part of the reason why they got rid of him. So
yeah.
I personally do kind of think Sam Darnold will be fine. I feel like all the options will be fine. I think it's definitely an upgrade from the quarterback position. I'm not saying it's a big upgrade, but an upgrade nonetheless.
I think we're saying
I feel good about all those pieces.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. We just have different views on from an NFL versus fantasy standpoint. But I think fantasy wise, I think we're in the same realm. We both have taken CMC number 1 overall. We both love the value of Robbie Anderson. We both are passing on DJ Moore at his current 4th round ADP, but we'll consider him maybe towards the back end of the 4th round. Not necessarily me so much. maybe in the 5th round, although I will, full disclosure, I did pass on him in a recent draft in the 5th round.
So where are you taking DJ Moore right now? Like, where are you taking him right
Actually,
now?
no, sorry.
Spot?
Correction. I was actually getting ready to take DJ Moore at 5'11", and he went 5'10".
Okay.
So,
Gotcha.
so I think there
mid to late 5th, you would take him.
Mid to late 5th, and this is after guys. Okay. And again, this is all in context, so it depends on who's around them. So guys that I like ahead of DJ Moore, I will take Tyler Lockett, Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson. Oh yeah. No, I would take DJ Moore over T. Higgins. I know you would do that. But if those guys are on the board,
I think I would take DJ Moore. I would take DJ Moore over Higgins. I'll take DJ Moore.
Yeah. So that sort of kind of, he's at the very bottom of that tier right there. So let's go to the next topic. Okay. We got one more topic for tonight. I know this pod's been running a little bit long. Hopefully you guys have been enjoying it and it's been entertaining. I promise very, very soon we will get back to our normal time and location,
set up,
our normal feel and vibe, and we will again have our esteemed and much needed co-host Chris Henderson back hosting the pod, so you don't have two random guys rambling long and spending excessive time on damn Sam Darnold and whatnot. All right, so let's go to our last topic of the night. So we have obviously been talking a lot about FFPC, which is a high stakes format. What many of you may or may not be aware of, it is a tight end premium format. And so we thought it was very important for us to cover exactly what that meant and discuss our approach to how we view tight ends in these particular formats. So, Dale, why don't you give us a definition or give us your thoughts on tight end premium?
Right. So first of all, we definitely want to kind of explain what exactly tight end premium is. And tight end premium, basically, it means specifically in FFPC, for every catch for a tight end, instead of them getting 1 point, which is a standard reception point total, they actually get 1.5 points. I play in dynasty leagues where the tight ends actually get 2 points per reception. And really, when you think about tight end premium, that's really all it involves, getting that extra point total for catching passes. It has no bearing on yardage, it has no bearing on touchdowns. It's really only just specifically reception. So when you're looking at the value of it, I mean, a tight end that gets touchdowns in a tight end premium league gets the same amount of points as a tight end that gets touchdowns in a standard league. And then also a tight end that gets yardage in the tight end premium league gets the same amount of points as far as a tight end that gets yardage in a standard fantasy league. The only thing that kind of separates the values is a tight end that's getting catches in the premium compared to a standard. So for me, when I value tight ends and tight end premium, really that's the only factor I'm looking at. I'm looking for a tight end that's actually getting probably more targets than the standard or typical tight end, because that's actually going to increase his value compared to the other tight ends, Now, as far as how I personally approach tight ends in the tight end premium league, I did do a little bit of research in the past, as far as, a tight end in a premium league and tight ends in standard leagues and where the separation occurs. And what I've found is it really only benefits the top end tight ends. The rest of the tight ends, it literally flattens out the value exactly the same way as a standard tight end league. So when I say the top end tight end, I'm really talking about like the top 2 or 3. So we're talking your Travis Kelce's, last year Darren Waller's, even Logan Thomas and TJ Hawkinson last year were kind of on the high end. They actually were the same order, so it wasn't really that big of a difference as far as ranking. It's just that the amount of points jumped up like anywhere between 15 and 30 points compared to a tight end premium league. So there is value in it, and for me, because of that specific circumstance, if I'm not going to get one of the top tight ends, and for me this year, that's actually just Kelce and Waller. I'm not I'm not that big of a Kittle fan. I'm actually starting to come around a little bit on Pitts, and it's funny. We had an episode not too long ago where we kind of I wouldn't
Yeah,
say we won Pitts, but we just basically kind of said we weren't really feeling his ADP. I've actually
yeah,
been getting him a little bit later than his ADP lately, which kind of for me it's a value. So I feel like if I'm going to take him, I might take him. I mean, it's better to take
yeah.
him when he's a
You got to
value.
get some shares. You got
Um,
to get some shares.
right. Because any other time I'm probably not. And then, as you know, I'm a big fan of Hawkinson this year.
Yeah,
Um, so those are really the tight ends that I'm really drafting on the high end. If I'm
yeah.
not getting those tight ends,
Just
wait.
wait.
I'm waiting.
Yeah,
And you know me, I study tight ends, so I'm looking at all different type of tight ends.
yeah,
I mean, I'm going into the deep blue sea.
yeah.
So
The
that's
tight
kind of how
end
I
whisperer.
approach tight end premium.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
tight
mean,
end
they're
whisperer.
out
All
there.
right. I'm going to hold you to it towards the end of this last topic and the end of the show. You're going to have to give us at least one tight end sleeper. I know we don't like the term sleepers and things of that nature,
Okay.
but I want you to give the audience at least one tight end they need to be on the lookout for, one draftable tight end. So as far as,
Okay.
how
Okay.
I approach the position, it's very similar to how you approach it. I didn't really necessarily do a deep dive into research, but I very much agree that I really care about targets and receptions. That is where you see that huge discrepancy in the tight end premium
Hmm.
league versus the non-tight end premium league. And so there are
Right.
very few tight ends that we can anticipate or bet on having 100 plus targets in a given year. And if we don't see that, or if I don't anticipate that, or I don't feel like a tight end can reach that goal, then they're almost an afterthought for me. So
Right.
we're
Hmm.
seeing Kelsey
Yeah.
go as high as a 1.02,
Man, we've
typically
seen
at
him as
the
high as 101.
1.03.
What are you talking about? We've seen him
Yeah,
go first
yeah,
before.
that's true. That's true. Uh, but
So
typically he falls in at about the 1.03. And
102,
for a guy,
103. Yeah.
yeah, and for a guy who can put up 300 plus fantasy points year in and year out with that level of consistency, not without having much change in his offense. If anything, they've lost
Right.
targets,
Right.
or have vacated targets with Sammy Watkins leaving. With an
Right.
elite level quarterback, an elite level head coach / OC, there's nothing,
Hmm.
I honestly can't argue or fault anybody from literally taking him number one overall in a tight end premium format, given
Right.
the positional scarcity at the tight end position, okay, across
That's
the
a big
board
word
in
right
all.
there. Scarcity for
Exactly.
sure. Yeah.
So I love taking Travis Kelsey when I can. Okay, I'm not going to take him above C-Mac or Dalvin Cook. And I think
So you're targeting him at 103.
right now, I do think that ADP will start to fall with time.
Okay.
So ideally, I'm waiting a little bit, but to make
Okay.
sure I have some shares right now, I have taken him a couple times at the 103. But
Okay.
what he allows you to do as far as a team build and roster construction standpoint, you can grab Travis Kelsey and then forget about that position. And rather than wasting some valuable draft capital in the fifth, sixth, or fourth rounds, or even in those
Hmm.
later rounds where people are just, may not necessarily be paying as attention, or, choosing whoever's at the top of the ADP board, those are important rounds, and those are rounds that I don't want to have to necessarily wait on trying to grab 3 or 4 tight ends, because I know it's a tight end premium, and I know I need to have at least one tight end that can provide me uh, stable production. The other thing he
Right.
offers you is you can play him at the flex position. It's a great thing about
Yeah.
the FFPC is they offer 2 flex.
Hmm.
So theoretically, you can start 3 tight ends, but being able
Yep.
to play him at the flex position and produce as high and have the upside as someone who you can draft in the top half of the draft. I mean, that can really set your team apart if you can hit elsewhere in the draft. So,
Right.
no secret, Travis Kelsey is a great pick almost anywhere in the first round if you want
Now,
to look at that.
and
Yeah,
we kind of had a smaller discussion about this in our group chat
yeah,
a few days ago when we were talking about specifically Darren Waller.
yeah,
And I kind of made a comment. I actually said Darren Waller can give Kelsey a run for his money as far as the number one tight end, in the
Yeah,
season.
I disagree with that
And
wholeheartedly.
right. He just, that's one of those reactions where I expect. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where you always give a pause before you even say it. But the reason I said that is last year, I think point differential between the two was maybe 20 to 30 points.
Okay.
So not that much. And again, with the tight end premium, what are we concerned about? A tight end that catches a lot of passes. Waller is or was the target leader for the Raiders last year. I don't see their offense changing much. Um, and he's still young. He's still getting better. I mean, he just converted to tight end maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. So he's still perfecting his craft at the position. I really is a guy that we can target. You know.
Yeah, so,
I'm sorry.
and
Go
I don't
ahead.
disagree with you there. I think my premise, or at least I think
Yeah.
what I would argue is that I wouldn't draft Waller ahead of Kelsey. And I don't think that you would do, would do that either. But I think you do have
Oh
a
no no
point.
no no. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you do have a point that we could see Waller even take a further step forward at that position and dominate even
Right.
more targets. Obviously, again,
Right.
news came out and some beat reporter was asked, "Can he improve?" And he said, "Of course he can improve." Honestly, to me, that is fluff beyond fluff. Like,
Yeah,
but
that's definitely fluff. Yeah.
yeah, but in essence, yes, he could potentially can improve. But
Right.
TD regression, I think, could hit both of these guys. But one thing that will stay
Right.
stable is likely the targets that they're going to get, and that's really what we care
Right.
about. No
That's
TD
number
production.
one. And that's kind of why I'm not as high on Kittle.
Yeah,
I do feel like he doesn't get the target share the way the other tight ends get.
yeah,
You have more mouths to feed even
yeah,
now. And the thing with Kittle, that team is very comfortable leaving Kittle into block. He's one of
yeah,
the better
mhm,
blocking tight ends
yeah,
in the league, and they have no problem having him stay in the block
yeah,
all game long. And Kittle doesn't mind either. So, and then also Mark Andrews, kind of same concern. He doesn't get now. Mark Andrews does get a fair amount of targets, but he doesn't get a high amount of targets. Mark
yeah,
Andrews is very efficient. He does catch the ball a lot.
yeah.
He scores these touchdowns. But again, as
The
far
pass
as
volume.
premium is concerned,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah. Sorry, low pass volume offense, so it makes it difficult for him to get those.
Right. Exactly. So for me, I'm not really targeting Mark Andrews. Now, both those tight ends, I do understand they're very valuable, and they fall apart. I
Yeah,
consider them, but I'm not targeting them.
yeah.
So
So yeah,
that's why I'm higher on a Pitts
yeah,
and a Hawkinson, because I do
yeah,
feel like they are two tight ends that
yeah.
can have the potential to get a lot
Yeah.
of targets.
And to be practical with this, when I don't want to say necessarily giving advice, more so describing how we approach this. And obviously, you can do what you will. There's more than one way to take down and win this tournament, especially when you can start multiple positions at two flex positions. But yeah, I think if you can get Kelsey in the first round, ideally, I don't mind starting off a draft with that. I do have a few Waller shares, but I found myself recently really just bypassing Waller. And ideally, what I want to do is I want to find the next Waller. I want to find the next Mark Andrews. I
Oh
want to
yeah,
find the next
for
Logan
sure.
Thomas. So ideally, I want to fill out those positions where it's harder to find the diamond in the rough. I want to get my solid production at the running backs. I want to get my stud or, breakout wide receivers that I feel strongly about. Maybe towards the mid to late round, if value falls like a Noah Fant in the seventh, eighth round, that's, maybe when I'll, grab a tight end. So like you mentioned with
Right.
Pitts earlier, if a tight end falls significantly past value and you're doing mass entry, it behooves you to probably take advantage of that. And the idea and with the sense that within that player's range of outcomes, they could hit their ceiling. And so you want to capitalize on that at value. So anytime I see value
Right.
like that, unless it's completely off the value for the most part, I'll try to capitalize on that. But yeah, I really want to just look in the later rounds. And that's really where I think we have succeeded in this particular format over the previous years,
Right.
that we've been able to find that diamond in the rough. So we're going to talk
Right.
much more extensively about tight ends in the future. and try and really highlight and showcase, 3 to 4 tight ends on the upcoming shows, maybe from week to week. That way we can give you guys a good perspective on how we value and where we're drafting, or if we're drafting said tight end. We talked about Kelsey and Waller. Those were obvious layups today. But we are going to leave you with, again, Deo's sleeper tight end. Give it to us.
Oh man. So I'm not even gonna be bashful. I'm not even gonna give just one. I'm gonna throw out three names out there.
3 names? Hold up. Wait, 3 names?
I'm gonna throw out three.
Okay.
Two of them you could probably say are sleepers. One of them
Yeah.
is not a sleeper at all. He's definitely
Okay.
being drafted. But these are guys, and honestly, none of these guys are really secrets. So you're not even really getting that, that secret Deo tight end sleeper that he's trying to keep close to the vest and maybe just tells Abby, because he can't hold it in for much longer. But so the first tight end that I do like that I mentioned on the show a little bit, or I've at least just kind of threw his name out there, was Noah Fant.
Okay.
I'm a big Noah Fant guy. Reason being, last year, second half of the season, while Drew Lock was having all those struggles, he was always trying to make plays downfield, and he threw interceptions, just made these dumb mistakes. I do recall seeing an article where the coaches said they were trying to have Drew Lock focus on more so the intermediate or short range
Mm-hmm.
passing game, and utilize Fant, because remember Fant was a first round pick just
Yeah.
2-3 years ago. He has the talent. He has the speed. He's a receiving tight end. They basically
Mm-hmm.
utilize him more. And when he actually started to do that, Noah Fant actually was producing a fair amount in the back end of the season last year. He ended up getting hurt, so it was kind of short lived. But you kind of saw that potential. We're always talking about tight ends. As they get older, they get better at their craft. So that kind of excited me a little bit. And
Yeah.
he's not being valued as somebody that can have that kind of ceiling. So
And
that's
I
the
will
first
tell
one.
you, yeah, I will tell you before you go on to the next one. He's someone that I think over the recent drafts, I found myself drafting and picking up a few shares because, like you said, uh, I'm starting to see him in the mid to late 7th round, and it's just too hard a value to pass on at that point for a guy
Right,
who can really provide some significant production. He has a talent,
right.
and
Hmm.
we all know that in any given moment we may get that Adam Schefter update that that boy Aaron Rodgers may end up
That's
in.
exactly what I was gonna say next. Yep, exactly.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. So who's the next? Who's the next
Um,
one?
so that's the first. So that's the known one. These other two guys are guys that I actually tweeted out from our account.
Okay,
So people have saw the tweet. So this
yeah.
is not news. And it's crazy because since I've tweeted it, both of these names have actually been in the news a lot more. So it's not even just secrets anymore. But I do feel like they're being mentioned for good reason. One of them is Tyler Conklin.
Hashtag right on cue.
Right on cue. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
our
we had
saying
this
right there.
running
So yeah,
joke. We had this running joke in our chat that as soon as we start, discussing or going in depth about a certain player or
or
uh,
anything really.
coach or literally anything, like it's immediately starts to blow up on Twitter. So we joke around that
Yeah,
we're bugged, and Twitter
yeah.
is somehow getting
Some
a hold
kind
of
of
our chat.
juju we put out there or something.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So with you go ahead and talk about the tight ends, but that was a surreal moment when that happened.
So you got Tyler Conklin, who's the tight end for the Vikings. Um, some
Yep.
would consider him the backup tight end. Me personally, I don't. And that kind of goes back to how he played at the end of last year. I was kind of
Hmm.
watching when Kyle Rudolph went out, how much they were utilizing him. He actually was getting more targets than Irv Smith, and we haven't even mentioned Irv Smith, but Irv Smith is the starter, and he's the one that people are kind of expecting to really make a big jump this year. But again, last year Conklin was getting a lot more playing time. He was getting targeted a lot. For me personally, I tend to like tight ends that are athletic. Big is good as well, but also athletic. And Conklin had that profile where it's one of those things where you just get the ball in his hands and he can produce. He's not one of those lumbering tight ends where he just catches it and just quickly gets tackled or He's just slowly
Yeah.
going up the scene. He's actually somebody that can actually play, if you will. So again, I was kind of high on him last year. Once they got rid of Kyle Rudolph, I kind of was focusing on him a little bit more. Started hearing, that Sigmund Bloom drum beats type thing, kind of hearing his name, kind of
Yeah.
whispered here and there. I was like, okay. Hey, I know you remember the day in the group chat. I just kind of, the morning I just woke up, I said, you know what? I'm ready. Tyler Conklin is my guy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So he's one guy I'm looking at, and then the
Yeah.
other guy is
So let me just say some quick things about Tyler Conklin. So number one,
okay.
yes, there's no doubt that you were probably the first person that I ever heard even mention the name Tyler Conklin. Uh, in fact, you didn't even mention his name. You sent me video footage of Tyler Conklin, 2020. I was like, "What are you doing?" And I guess, maybe it started off with us
Oh
talking
man.
about, okay, who's this year breakout tight end? Of course, Irv Smith came up, and you were like, nah, and my initial thought was, okay, maybe, you're bringing up Tyler Conklin as a reason why Irv Smith can't break out. But correct me if I'm wrong. You think Tyler Conklin is actually going to likely produce or can produce more than Irv Smith? Obviously, the better
Right.
value you can get him.
I really do feel like it's one of those situations where he's not the backup. I really do
Yeah,
feel like it's a 1A and 1B. And I'm not
yeah,
even sure if I want to say he's the 1B. There's a chance he could literally be the 1A.
okay.
He's been with
So
the
you
team
realize,
longer.
so you realize that when we make these short clips and we post them, that this is going to get posted. So I want you to
No, I
repeat
know
what
that,
you just
yeah.
said. I want you to
No,
repeat what you just said.
I feel like there's a chance. Not
Okay.
only is Tyler Conklin most likely part of the 1A, 1B combination, but he actually might be the 1A, you know?
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that's with certainty,
Yeah.
but don't be surprised, is all I'm saying. Don't be surprised if that
Well,
happens.
I just think it's very interesting because basically Tyler Conklin, for the most part, even in these high stake leagues where we're drafting 20 rounds or 20 plus rounds, he's just oftentimes going undrafted and
Right, you
unloved.
can
So
get him.
it's very
You can get him
interesting.
still.
But yeah, I definitely, I honestly had to give you just tremendous amounts of credit for even bringing him up as early as you did, which I don't know. I think that we looked at the text and that was like back in April or March or something like that. And then
Yeah.
but I also got to credit you for at least listening to us and posting it on Twitter, which you finally did. And luckily, you beat
Oh man.
the
I
Tyler
like to
Conklin
keep things close to the vest,
that
man. I
even
like to
exists.
keep things. I like
Yeah,
to keep things in my folder and walk around on my own.
yeah,
So you know,
yeah. That's okay. That's
um,
okay. That's okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're enjoying it. All right. So before we
So the
end the show,
last one, the
last
last
score.
one. Hold on. One more. I told him I was giving three of them, so let me give him the third one.
Okay.
So the third one is actually the rookie, on the Los Angeles Rams, the fourth rounder, Jacob Harris, the rookie out of the University of Central Florida. Um, so with that guy, so I kind of became aware of him during the draft season.
Yeah.
Okay. And I mean, I'm not here to take credit at all. I saw somebody else just mention him. And in draft season, especially when you play Dynasty, they literally will mention every player that's probably draft
Yeah.
eligible. So I saw his name and that made me kind of look into him a little bit. And what I found was, number one, initially he was being talked up as a wide receiver. So I wasn't even looking at him as part of a tight end
Mhm.
premium. He was just really just one of the receivers, um, the large quantity of receivers that were in this draft, that I noticed. Um, One of the things that kind of stuck out specifically with him was his size. Massive human being,
Yeah.
you're talking Gronk with a little bit more height,
Yeah.
Um, and again, he was a receiver at the time. And then I started to hear they were considering maybe converting him to tight end. Kind of like the same thing we heard with Chase Claypool last year.
Yeah.
So I heard it,
Yeah.
but I wasn't like, okay, again,
Yeah.
they said that about Chase Claypool last year, and you saw he stayed as a receiver. So, again, I was just kind of just paying attention to him. Now, one thing, and this is a profile or attribute that I didn't really know anything about until this draft season, but there's something called the RAS score. the relative athletic score or
Mhm.
something like that. If I find out, I'll try to have somebody tweet it out in the account. But it basically measures, um, I guess, on an even playing field, how athletic all the players are in the draft. And they measure by position. And when I was going through my research, with the wide receivers in the current or the most recent draft, Jacob Harris was the number one ranked athletic receiver in the draft. I believe number two was Chase, or Jamar Chase. And there, some other names kind of right after him. But for this guy to be basically an unknown player and to be ranked number one, I started to say, okay, this guy obviously has raw talent, just general, just talent. And, again, one of the things I like to look at in my tight ends, I want the big athletic tight ends. And then on top of all of that, you see the Los Angeles Rams, who didn't have a first round pick. Their first pick was in the second round. They took Tutu Atwell. I don't even remember if they took in the third round, but in the fourth round, they decided to use a draft pick on Jacob Harris. Kind of raise another eyebrow. Like, okay, so he's been noticed. There's a lot of other receivers in this draft that were talked up that weren't drafted in as high as the fourth round, that weren't even drafted. So that was to some extent significant. And then add on top of all of that, you start to see reports of them utilizing him during OTAs. The coach McVay actually kind of saying he's like a special project or whatever. So when you hear all of that, like Sigmund Bloom always says, that's that drum beat you hear. You're just kind of seeing this guy. You're kind of seeing the path of this guy
Yeah.
becoming relevant. And our motto, we stay ready so we don't have to get ready. He's the type of player that, just like Conklin, you can get at the end of your draft. And certain things fall a certain way. You'll look up week 4 and he's being utilized as one of the top weapons for the Rams, and he has the athletic ability. So once they get the ball in his hands, who knows what can happen. So that's
Yeah.
definitely another sleeper tight end. I just want you to kind of keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah. And I think, what you did right there is so important. You took us through the process of how you got from player A to player B. And
Yeah.
one thing that we talk about often in our group is we never want to just say, I'm on a certain player or I'm high on a certain player. We really don't want to necessarily just list a bunch of points on why you should draft a certain player. We are very interested in the process. How did you get from point A to point B? And I think it's important, that we oftentimes go through that on this podcast. I think we don't necessarily care so much about the time restraints. At this stage, we don't have to
Obviously.
worry about, endorsements and having, X period of time. We can really go into deep detail. And
Right.
how you came about on Jacob Harris, I think is just so important because, again, when you first brought up the name, the initial inclination or the initial thought is to say, oh, they have Tyler Higbee. This is a rookie tight end, completely ignoring it. But going
Right.
over his athleticism score, going over the fact that he's a wide receiver and a convert tight end, they lost Gerald Everett. Then you talk about the drum beats with the head coaching staff saying he's a special project. And don't
Right.
minimize the fact that Tyler Higbee was not at OTAs because of whatever injury or for whatever reason. That's just
Right.
more snaps, more eyes, more experience that
Mhm.
Jacob Harris, gets throughout that period. So, like
Yep.
you said, you don't necessarily even have to draft him. But as soon as you're aware of a player like that, if Tyler Higbee goes down, God forbid, with an injury, we never wish injury on anyone, but if he does goes down with an injury,
Mhm.
you already know and have in the back of your mind, I need to spend a significant amount of fab to try and get Jacob Harris because that is an immediate league winner,
Right.
given that he can slot into that role, given his athleticism, that he's a wide receiver, and that may just use him as a receiving tight end. That's how we
Right.
viewed Logan Thomas last year.
Logan, I was actually exactly gonna say that's how we did
Yeah.
Logan Thomas last year. Yeah.
So it's not like yes, we ended up drafting a lot of Logan Thomas. We drafted him very late. We
Mhm.
didn't know how he was going to perform, but we were already aware of him. So we
Mm-hmm.
didn't see that week one production as this huge outlier. We didn't see that
Fluke.
week one
No.
production as a
That
fluke.
was confirmation right there. That was
That
basically
was
like, okay,
exactly
yeah,
that was
we
confirmation.
saw
And
it.
so what that allowed us to do is not only feel comfortable in terms of adding even more Logan Thomas, that made me feel comfortable in starting him week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't miss out on much production at all with Logan Thomas. In fact, I think I may have even
Right.
started him in a few leagues week 1 because we were comfortable, because we had gone through the process, we understood, and had taken a deep dive in that particular player. We were already ready. So,
Right.
like we said, if you stay ready,
You don't have to get ready.
you don't got to get ready.
I said, God, give me a warning. Please take me for the morning, so I leave more disappointments than I ever will appointments. Give a fuck about you.